The morning light streamed through the kitchen window, casting a mosaic of light and shade across the tiled floor. I stared down at my own hands, which seemed to betray my age more than my face ever could. The skin was wrinkled, the veins prominent, and marked with the spots of time. I was 78 years old, after all. I often recalled how my own father had struggled to get around the house at this age, yet here I was, still managing the cleaning, the cooking, and even tending to the garden. My name is Arthur Whitmore, and for more than 30 years, I have been the sole occupant of this two-story home in a quiet suburb. It has been 3 years since I became a widower. My wife, Clara Whitmore, had been a brilliant financial analyst. She was never the type to grace magazine covers or appear on television, but within professional circles, her name carried immense weight. She could forecast market shifts with an accuracy that bordered on prescience. I poured a fresh cup of tea, her favorite Earl Grey, and settled into the chair by the window that looked out onto the garden. Clara always claimed it was the most beautiful vista in the house. The jasmine bush she planted for our 20th anniversary was in magnificent bloom, its white blossoms like tiny stars against a backdrop of deep green foliage. Amelia, my daughter and our only child, was expected today with her husband, Marcus. She's 52 now, but sometimes I can still picture the little girl who would run to me with scraped knees, demanding a kiss to make the pain disappear. These days, she visits once a month, twice if they're in need of something. I rose from my seat and began preparing dinner. Lasagna had been her favorite meal since she was a child, though I wasn't entirely sure she still remembered that. Over the past few years, a chasm had quietly opened between us. After Clara passed, I felt as though I had become a responsibility. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? I've always been self-sufficient, with my own home, a pension, and savings. I never once requested their assistance. And yet, I could see it in their eyes, I had transformed into a problem that needed solving. The chime of the doorbell cut through my thoughts. They were earlier than I expected. Wiping my hands on my apron, I went to let them in. "Dad," Amelia said, embracing me with a warmth that felt disproportionate to the 3 weeks since our last visit. I sensed immediately that something was amiss. The enthusiasm was overdone. "Hello, sweetheart," I managed a smile, my gaze shifting over her shoulder to Marcus. He stood just behind her, impeccably dressed as always. His brown hair was styled with precision and his tailored beige suit fit his slender frame perfectly. At 45, he could easily pass for 35. He offered me a pleasant smile, but I had long ago learned to decipher the ambition lurking behind it. "Arthur, it's wonderful to see you." He stepped forward to give me a perfunctory pat on the shoulder, his cologne a mix of expensive fragrance and ambition. "You as well, my boy. Please, come inside. I've made lasagna." "Oh, Dad, you shouldn't go to so much trouble," Amelia said, but I saw a flicker of delight in her eyes. She had always adored my lasagna. We moved toward the kitchen, and I began to set the table. Marcus offered to help, an offer I politely refused. I was well aware of his discomfort in my dated kitchen. "How is the business, Marcus?" I asked, arranging the cutlery. "It's going splendidly," he said, his posture straightening. "We've just secured the catering for Anderson Consulting's big anniversary event. It's a massive opportunity. If this goes well, it could lead to a permanent contract." Marcus ran a small but successful catering company. It began with him preparing canapés for friends' gatherings and had grown into a business with 5 employees and a downtown office. I had always admired his drive. "That's fantastic news," I said with sincerity. "You've always been so motivated." "Yes, but we need to expand," he said, exchanging a brief, meaningful look with Amelia. "We're considering opening a second location, something closer to the northern suburbs." "And you require an investment?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "I am too old for these games." Amelia flushed slightly, a trait she inherited from me, not her mother. Clara never blushed. "Not at all, Dad. We're simply sharing our plans," she said quickly. I gave a slight nod and placed the steaming dish of lasagna on the table. The dinner conversation remained light and casual. Amelia spoke of her work as a tax consultant, clients, endless paperwork, new regulations. Marcus chimed in with anecdotes about his catering ventures. As I listened, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were holding something back. Their talk was filled with generalities and lacked any real substance. After the meal, we retired to the living room. I proposed tea and the apple pie I had baked the day before. Marcus politely refused, citing his diet, of course. Amelia accepted a generous slice. "Dad," she began, as I settled into my favorite armchair by the fireplace. "Marcus and I have been thinking. This house is just so large for you on your own." There it was. I had been anticipating this conversation for some time. "I enjoy the space," I answered softly. "It holds a great many memories." "Of course, it does," Marcus agreed quickly. "But maintaining a property this size must be draining at your age for my age." He spoke as if I were 90, not 78. "I manage just fine," I stated. "Mrs. Jenkins comes to clean once a week, and I handle the rest." "But winter is coming, Dad, all the snow," Amelia pressed on. "Don't you remember you slipped on the steps last year?" "I did not slip. I misjudged a step," I corrected her. "That can happen to anyone, at any age." "We're just concerned for your well-being," Marcus said, leaning forward with an expression of deep sincerity. "There is a wonderful residence called Sunny Acres. They offer constant medical oversight and a community of people your age. Sunny Acres was one of the most exclusive retirement facilities in the area. I had visited once to see a friend of Clara's. It had perfectly manicured lawns, a staff with permanent smiles, and an underlying scent of loneliness that no amount of lavender air freshener could mask. "I prefer to remain here," I said with finality. "I am perfectly capable of looking after myself." "No one is suggesting you aren't, Dad," Amelia adopted the tone she used when she felt I was being difficult. "But you have to be practical about the future. Selling the house would fund a comfortable existence at Sunny Acres for the rest of my days, and the remainder would, of course, go to them." I left that last part unsaid, but we all knew it was the truth. "I'll give it some thought," I replied, a simple way of ending the discussion that we all understood. Amelia sighed but didn't push further. She knew me too well. Or at least, she thought she did. I had become more resilient since Clara's death. Perhaps tougher. Or maybe I had just stopped pretending that everything was all right when it wasn't. "By the way," Marcus said, abruptly changing the subject. "I was reading an article about antique collecting the other day. I recall Clara had a collection of watches, didn't she?" I tensed but worked to keep my expression neutral. "Yes, Clara had a few lovely pieces. She was a true connoisseur," Amelia added. "I remember how she could talk for hours about the movements and the history of different brands." "Yes, it was her passion," I agreed. "She had a particular fondness for pocket watches." "Do you still have them?" Marcus asked casually. "Of course," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I keep them in the safe. It was her collection, and I would never dream of parting with it." "Of course, Dad." "We understand," Amelia said hastily. "I was just curious. Why don't you show them to us? It's been so long since I've seen them." I hesitated. There was something about their curiosity that felt disingenuous, but perhaps I was just becoming overly suspicious in my old age. "Another time," I said. "They are stored in a safety deposit box at the bank." It was a lie. While the majority of the collection was indeed at the bank, I kept a few of the most special pieces here at home, in a case in my bedroom. "Oh, of course," Marcus was visibly disappointed but masked it quickly. "I understand completely. Safety is paramount." The conversation drifted to other matters. They spoke of a recent trip to Arizona and a new car they were considering. I listened, nodding at appropriate moments, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking of Clara, of how she cherished her watches, especially the Vacheron Constantin pocket watch she had acquired at an auction in Geneva for a price she chose not to disclose, even to me. When they were finally ready to depart, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. How strange that my own daughter felt more and more like a visitor. Where had things gone wrong? When did this distance grow between us? We'll stop by in a couple of weeks, Amelia promised, hugging me goodbye. Think about our suggestion. About Sunny Acres. I will, I said with a smile, knowing full well I would not. Marcus gave my shoulder another pat, his expensive cologne lingering in the air. It was good to see you, Arthur. Take care of yourself. I shut the door after them and leaned against it. The house suddenly felt cavernously quiet and empty, but it was my quiet, my emptiness, and I had no intention of giving it up. That evening, I phoned Doris, my neighbor and perhaps the only truly close friend I had left. She is 72, also a widow, and we have an understanding that requires few words. Did they visit? She asked after we exchanged greetings. They did. And they brought up the retirement home again. Doris snorted. I'm not surprised. This house must be worth a small fortune now. The neighborhood has become very desirable. It's not just the house, I said. Today they were asking about Clara's watch collection. Watches? Doris sounded taken aback. Why on earth would they be interested in that? I'm not sure, I sighed. Marcus mentioned something about expanding his business. Perhaps they're short on funds. And they think they can just walk in and claim what belonged to your wife. Doris was indignant. It's your property now. They haven't asked to sell anything yet, I said, trying to remain objective. They only expressed an interest. You be careful, Arthur, Doris warned. You are far too generous with them. She was probably right. I have always tried to find the good in people, even when they gave me every reason not to. It was a quality Clara found both endearing and utterly naive. After our call, I went upstairs and retrieved the watch case from the wardrobe. I opened it and surveyed the contents. 5 pocket watches from various makers, all in immaculate condition. Clara was meticulous about her collection. But she always stored the most precious piece, the Vacheron Constantine, in its own separate case. I lifted it, feeling its pleasant weight in my hand, admiring the engraved gold casing and the perfect dial. Clara used to say that a fine watch possesses a soul. I opened the cover and gazed at the intricate movement, which still worked flawlessly. I wound it and held it to my ear, the steady ticking a comforting sound that transported me back to the evenings Clara and I spent together in this very house. I closed the watch and placed it back in its case. Something about Amelia and Marcus's behavior left me feeling unsettled. I decided then that tomorrow I would move the watch to a more secure location. My intuition was screaming that their interest in Clara's collection was no mere coincidence, and I would be wise to be on my guard. As I drifted off to sleep in my large, empty bed, I reflected on how much my life had altered in the past 3 years. I thought about the loneliness that had become my steadfast companion, about the daughter who had become a polite stranger, and about a house so full of memories it sometimes felt like a living entity. And deep down, I had a premonition that the fragile piece I had so carefully constructed since Clara's passing was about to be shattered. A few days after the visit from Amelia and Marcus, a sense of unease still lingered. Their questions about Clara's watch collection felt far too deliberate. I mentioned it to Doris when we met for our morning coffee on her veranda. It was a lovely spring morning, the sun already providing some warmth against the lingering chill. They had never brought up the watches before, I said, stirring the sugar into my coffee and watching it dissolve. Not once in the 3 years since Clara died. And now, all of a sudden, this intense curiosity. Doris pursed her lips, a sure sign of her displeasure. And you mentioned that Marcus is looking to expand his business. Yes, a second office in the northern part of town, I confirmed with a sip of my coffee. But they didn't ask for money directly. Not yet, she countered. And this watch, is it particularly valuable? I nodded. Especially the Vacheron Constantine. Clara bought it at an auction in Geneva. She never told me what she paid, but I have a feeling it was a considerable sum. She always kept it apart from the rest of the collection. And how often do Amelia and Marcus visit you? Usually once a month, sometimes less. Doris scoffed. Not very often for an only daughter, I sighed. It was a familiar refrain in our conversations. They have their own lives, Doris. Amelia has always been independent. Independent. Doris raised an eyebrow. Didn't you tell me she used to call you every other day when she was with her first husband, Leo? She had a point. Before Marcus, there was Leo, a kind, gentle high school teacher. Their marriage ended after 7 years, a matter of incompatible personalities, Amelia had explained. A year later, she met Marcus. He was Leo's complete opposite, charismatic, ambitious, and relentlessly driven. Since then, Amelia's visits had become less and less frequent. Marcus keeps her very busy with his business, I offered as a weak defense, not truly believing my own words. And Amelia is too busy to visit her own father. Doris shook her head. You know, Arthur, sometimes you're too kind to people who don't deserve it. I said nothing. What could I say? That I couldn't stand the thought of my only child actively avoiding me? That I was terrified to admit that we had become strangers? Just be cautious, Doris said, placing her hand over mine. And that watch, perhaps you should check on it, just to be sure it's safe. I looked at her, surprised. You don't think Amelia would? I'm not thinking anything, Doris shrugged. Just check. That evening, I went up to my bedroom and opened the wardrobe. Tucked away behind a stack of old linens was a small mahogany box inlaid with mother-of-pearl. I took it out and placed it on the bed. The box had no lock. I had lost the tiny key years ago, but it hadn't seemed to matter. No one besides me knew of its existence. Or so I had thought. Inside lay 5 pocket watches from different makers. I carefully lifted each one, inspecting its condition. They were all there, except... I froze. The special case that was meant to hold the Vacher and Constantine was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. I tipped the box over, shaking its contents onto the bedspread. Maybe I had moved it somewhere else. But I distinctly remembered placing it back in its case after my last inspection. I began a frantic search of the room, opening every drawer, peering under the bed, checking the pockets of old coats in the wardrobe. The watch was gone. The thought I had been pushing away solidified into a painful certainty. The watch had been stolen, and I knew exactly who was responsible. Amelia and Marcus. Who else could have known about the box? Who else had been in my home recently? Only them. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my hands trembling. My own daughter had stolen my late wife's most cherished possession. The watch that had held so much meaning for Clara. The one she had cared for so meticulously. My first instinct was to call Amelia and demand an explanation. But something held me back. Perhaps it was intuition, or a need to understand the situation fully before making an accusation. I gathered the remaining watches, returned them to the box, and put it back in its hiding place. Then I went downstairs to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, not a regular habit, but more of a necessity at that moment. I needed to calm my racing thoughts. Why did they need that specific watch? Yes, it was the most valuable piece in the collection, but if they needed money, why not just ask? I would have helped them if I could. Amelia knew that. Or was this about more than just money? I replayed our last conversation. Marcus had been talking about his business expansion. Amelia had mentioned a new car. Perhaps they were desperate for funds and decided theft was easier than asking. But how did they know where I kept it? I had never shown them the box. It was always concealed behind the linens. And then, it came to me. 2 weeks ago, Amelia and Marcus had dropped by unannounced. I was out in the garden when they arrived. Amelia said they were in the area and decided to stop in. I invited them inside, and while I was brewing tea, Marcus asked to use the upstairs bathroom. He was gone for quite some time, but I hadn't thought anything of it. Now it all made sickening sense. He must have been searching for the watch. He must have found it. And during their most recent visit, they had asked about the collection to see if I had noticed it was missing. And I, like a fool, hadn't even checked the box after they left. I finished the wine and set the glass down firmly on the table. What was my next move? Call the police? No, I couldn't do that to my own daughter, despite her betrayal. Confront them directly? What if they just denied it all? I had no concrete proof, only my suspicions. There was something else that bothered me. Clara had always treated this watch with a unique reverence. She didn't just store it separately, she never showed it to guests or mentioned it in discussions with other collectors. Only to me. She once told me that this watch was more than just a beautiful mechanism. There's something special about it, she had said, but never elaborated. I decided to call Doris. They stole the watch, I said as soon as she picked up. What? She sounded alarmed. Are you certain? Positive. The Vacheron Constantine is gone. I just checked the box. Oh, Arthur, Doris sighed. I am so sorry. What are you going to do? I don't know, I answered honestly. Calling the police feels like too much. But it's theft, Arthur. I know it is, but it's my daughter, Doris. And I'm not even sure I could prove it was her. The box wasn't locked. I lost the key ages ago. Doris was quiet for a moment. Maybe you should just call Amelia. Ask her directly. I considered it, but it didn't feel right. If Amelia really did steal the watch, she would almost certainly lie, and that would only make things more complicated. No, I said finally. First, I want to understand what they're up to. Why this particular watch? It's valuable, isn't it? Yes, but it's more than that. Clara treated it differently. She never showed it to anyone. Never even mentioned it to fellow collectors. Maybe there's something hidden inside it, Doris suggested. Jewelry, or something of that nature. I had never considered that. Could Clara have hidden something inside the watch? It seemed improbable, but she had always been a woman of many surprises. I don't know, I said. But I intend to find out what they're plotting. And how will you do that? I thought for a moment. I needed a plan, something that would allow me to uncover what was happening without tipping my hand. For a start, I said, I'm going to find out where they might have sold it. There aren't that many places in this city where you can get a fair price for a rare antique watch. You think they've sold it already? It's likely. If they need money for Marcus's business, they wouldn't hold on to it for long. So, what's your plan? Call every antique shop in town. Not every shop, I replied. I'll start with Liam Brodie. He was an old friend of Clara's and is the most respected antique watch expert in the city. If Amelia wanted a good price, she'd likely go to him. And if Liam did buy the watch, can you prove it's yours? That was a valid question. I didn't have the original paperwork for it. Clara kept all of those documents in her office, and I had no idea where. I'm not sure, I admitted. But first, I need to find out if they went to him. I'll figure out the rest later. Be careful, Arthur, Doris cautioned. This is a very messy situation. After speaking with Doris, I sat in silence for a long time, contemplating my next move. A week had passed since Amelia and Marcus's visit, and in that time, there had been no calls or messages. This was unusual, even for them. Typically, Amelia would make a cursory call at least once or twice a month to check on me. Their silence only confirmed my suspicions. They were keeping their distance, afraid I had discovered the theft. Or perhaps they were just waiting for things to quiet down before making another appearance. I decided to give them a bit more time. Let them believe I was still oblivious. In the meantime, I would begin my own quiet investigation. The next day, I started calling various antique shops around the city, pretending to be a collector searching for a Vacheron Constantine pocket watch. No one had anything of the sort. I then tried Liam Brodie's shop, but his assistant informed me that he was out of the country and wouldn't be back for 3 more days. It was a delay, but I was not deterred. I would visit Liam the moment he returned. For now, all I could do was wait and wonder. I found myself frequently pondering what, if anything, might be hidden inside that watch. Clara never shared the finer details of her work with me. The less you know, the better for you, she would say. The world of high finance was filled with secrets, not all of them pleasant. Maybe the watch contained some secret related to her career. Or maybe it was something more personal, something she wanted to conceal even from me. The thought that Clara might have kept secrets from me was unsettling. We had been together for nearly 50 years. I thought I knew her completely. But perhaps I had been wrong. That night, I dreamt of Clara. She was in her study, her back to me, hiding something in a desk drawer. When I asked what she was doing, she turned with a smile and said, "Just preparing a surprise, my love," but I saw something else in her eyes, a flicker of anxiety, of guilt. I awoke with a sense of disquiet that stayed with me all day. On the third day after I discovered the theft, Amelia finally called. Her voice was breezy and casual, as if nothing had happened. "Dad, how are you? Just wanted to check in and see if everything's all right." "I'm fine, thank you," I answered, struggling to keep my own voice steady. "And how are you and Marcus?" "We're great. Marcus has a big corporate event he's catering. He's swamped. And I'm just, the usual grind." We chatted for a few more minutes about insignificant things, the weather, my health, neighborhood gossip. Not a single word about the watch, not a hint about their last visit. "By the way," Amelia said before hanging up, "Marcus and I were thinking of stopping by this weekend, if you're free." "Of course. I would love to see you," I lied. After the call, my resolve hardened. They were clearly plotting something, and I was determined to uncover the truth. I called Doris and told her about Amelia's call. "They're coming this weekend," I said. "And they're acting as if nothing is wrong." "Maybe they want to see if you've noticed it's missing yet," Doris suggested. "Perhaps. Or they might have another reason." "What will you do?" "I'll play the part of the unsuspecting father," I said. "Let them think their scheme is working. And then I'll wait for Liam to get back." The next 2 days passed in a haze of anxious waiting. I tried to keep busy with my usual routine, cleaning, reading, working in the garden, but my thoughts kept returning to the watch, to Amelia and Marcus, and to whatever secret Clara might have been guarding. The evening before their planned visit, I checked the watch box one last time. It was as I had left it. The Vacheron Constantine was gone. The other watches remained. I closed the box and put it back in its hiding place in the wardrobe. Tomorrow, I would perform my role as the blissfully unaware father. And after that, I would find out the truth, no matter what it took. Amelia and Marcus never came that weekend. They called at the last minute to cancel, offering vague excuses about an urgent work matter for Amelia and a sudden order for Marcus. I wasn't surprised, and in a way, I was relieved. It would have been difficult to maintain the pretense of normalcy. Monday morning started like any other. I was up at 7, enjoyed a cup of coffee on the veranda, and skimmed the morning paper. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, nothing to suggest the events that were about to unfold. The phone rang just as I was finishing watering the African violets in the living room, a variety Clara had been particularly fond of. I set down the watering can and answered, assuming it was Doris. "Arthur Whitmore speaking." "Mr. Whitmore, this is Liam Brody." His voice was strained, which was highly unusual for the ever-composed Liam. "Liam, hello. It's good to hear from you. Are you back from your travels?" "Yes, I returned last night." "Mr. Whitmore." Arthur, he hesitated, as if struggling to find the right words. "You need to see what was hidden inside that watch." My heart seemed to stop for a beat. "What watch are you referring to, Liam?" "Clara's Vacheron Constantine. Your daughter and her husband brought it to me for an appraisal a few days ago. They wanted to sell it." I slowly sank into a nearby chair. My suspicions were confirmed. Amelia and Marcus had indeed stolen the watch and were attempting to sell it. "What did you tell them?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I told them I needed some time to evaluate it properly, that I would be in touch in a few days. But that's not the main issue, Arthur. When I was examining the movement, I found a hidden compartment. A hidden compartment. I was stunned. In all the years Clara had owned that watch, she had never mentioned such a thing. Yes, a very cleverly made one. It's nearly impossible to detect unless you know exactly where to look. And inside, I found a photograph of a young man and a small key. The room felt like it was tilting. A photograph of a man and a key. What could it all mean? Are you certain it was Clara's watch? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Absolutely. I remember it distinctly. Clara showed it to me on several occasions, though she never let me actually hold it. It's one of a kind, with an engraving on the inside of the cover, her initials, CW, and the year 1988. That was the year of our silver anniversary. Clara had bought the watch at that auction in Geneva, where we had gone to celebrate. What are you going to do, Liam? I asked. Have you spoken to Amelia yet? No, not yet. I thought it best to speak with you first. The watch, it belongs to you, does it not? Yes, I answered firmly. Amelia and Marcus took it without my permission. Liam sighed. I could hear the rustle of papers on his desk. That's what I suspected. Marcus was being unusually pushy, claiming you had given the watch to Amelia after Clara's death, but something about his story felt off. I never gave her that watch, I said, my voice hardening. He stole it from my house. Arthur, can you come down to the shop? I think you need to see what I've discovered and retrieve the watch. Of course, I agreed. I can be there in an hour. After ending the call, I sat motionless for a while, trying to process what I had just learned. The secret compartment, the photograph of an unknown man, the key. What did it all mean? And why had Clara never breathed a word of it to me? I quickly got myself ready and called a taxi. During the ride to Liam's shop, my thoughts whirled like a frantic beehive. Who was this man in the photograph? Why had Clara kept his picture hidden in the secret compartment of her favorite watch? And what did that little key unlock? Liam's shop was located in the old town, in a building that dated back to the turn of the century. The vintage sign, the dark wood window frames, and the little bell that tinkled upon entry all contributed to a feeling of stepping back in time. Liam was waiting for me. He was with a customer but excused himself as soon as he saw me. Arthur, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please, come into my office. He led me through the main part of the shop to a small, cozy room in the back. It was furnished with a solid wooden desk, a couple of chairs, and shelves overflowing with books and catalogues. Please, sit, Liam said, gesturing to a chair. Can I get you some tea? Coffee? No, thank you. I sat down, feeling the tension in my shoulders. Show me what you found, Liam. He nodded and opened a desk drawer. He took out a familiar dark blue velvet case and set it on the desk in front of me. Then, he carefully removed the watch. The Vacheron Constantine looked just as I remembered it, the intricately engraved gold case, the pristine dial, the hand stopped at 1:45. Your son-in-law didn't wind it, Liam noted. Which is for the best. Old movements like this should be run regularly, but not too frequently. I nodded silently and reached for the watch. Liam passed it to me, and I felt its familiar weight in my palm. I opened the cover, looked at the dial, then flipped the watch over to see the engraving Liam had described, CW, and the year of our silver wedding. Now, look here, Liam said. He took the watch back and gently pried open the back cover, revealing the intricate movement. Do you see this small panel? It appears to be part of the case, but it's actually. He pressed something with a fine tool, and the panel slid aside, revealing a tiny hidden compartment. I leaned in, holding my breath. Here Liam used a pair of tweezers to extract a small, folded paper from the compartment and placed it on the desk. This is what I found. With a sense of dread, I unfolded the paper. Inside was a photograph, a small, yellowed image of a young man with dark hair and a serious expression. He was looking directly at the camera, a faint smile playing on his lips. I felt a strange sense of vague recognition in his features, but I couldn't place where I might have seen him before. Beside the photo was a tiny key, no larger than my pinky nail. It was an old key, with an ornate head decorated with some kind of floral pattern. "Who is this man?" Liam asked quietly. "I don't know," I answered truthfully, staring at the picture. "I've never seen him before." "There's something written on the back," Liam pointed out. I turned the photo over. There was an inscription in small, neat handwriting that I recognized instantly as Clara's. Robert, 1964. Forgive me, in 1964. 2 years before I met Clara. Who was this Robert? And why was Clara asking for his forgiveness? And what do you suppose this key unlocks? Liam asked, picking up the small metal object. I have no idea, I shook my head. Clara had never mentioned a key or a hidden compartment in the watch. And she certainly had never mentioned a Robert. We were both quiet for a moment, absorbing the situation. "What are you going to do now, Arthur?" Liam finally asked. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts. First, I am taking the watch, the photograph, and the key. They belong to me. Second, I am going to find out who Robert is, what this note means, and what this key opens. What about Amelia and Marcus? They'll be expecting to hear from me. I considered what to do about my daughter and her husband. Confront them? Call the police? Or try to sort this out myself? Tell them, I said, tell them you need more time for the appraisal. That the watch is exceptionally rare and you need to consult with an expert in Europe. That should buy me some time to figure all of this out. Liam nodded. A good plan. But they won't wait forever. Marcus was very insistent on a quick sale. I understand. But I need a few days, at least. Of course, Arthur. I'll do what I can. He carefully placed the watch back in its case and put the photograph and key into a small envelope. Here. Take this, and be careful. I thanked Liam and, after making sure everything was secure, placed the case and envelope into my bag. One more thing, Arthur, Liam said as I was about to leave. When Marcus brought the watch in, he wasn't alone. Amelia was with him, but he seemed intensely interested in what might be inside the watch. He asked numerous questions about the movement, how it opened, whether there could be any hidden compartments. I froze. You think they knew about the secret compartment? I'm not sure, Liam admitted. But Marcus was definitely searching for something. He even offered me a bonus if I would conduct a thorough inspection of the mechanism and report any unusual findings. It was very strange. If Amelia and Marcus simply wanted to sell the watch for cash, why would they have such a specific interest in its internal workings? Why offer extra money for an inspection? Thank you for the warning, Liam, I said. I'll keep that in mind. Leaving the shop, I hailed another taxi and gave Doris's address. I needed to talk to someone, to think this through, and Doris was the only person I could fully trust. As always, Doris welcomed me with open arms. She took one look at my face and knew something was terribly wrong. Arthur, what happened? You look as though you've seen a ghost. Perhaps I have, I replied, moving into her sitting room and sinking into a chair. The ghost of Clara's past. I recounted everything, Liam's call, the watch, the hidden compartment with the photograph and the key, the note on the back. Doris listened patiently, only shaking her head or raising her eyebrows in surprise. And you have no idea who this Robert could be? She asked when I finished. None. In all our years together, Clara never once mentioned a Robert. What about her life before she met you? Did she ever talk about it? I thought back. Clara had always been private about her past. I knew the basic facts, where she was born, where she studied, her early jobs, but the personal details, the people, the relationships, were always kept vague. Not much, I admitted. She always said her real life began when she met me. Doris chuckled. A classic move. My life began with you, darling, and whatever came before is best left unasked. I took the photograph from the envelope and showed it to Doris. This is him. Robert. Doris studied the picture. Whom? A handsome young man. How old do you think he is here? 20? 22. Around that, I agreed. The picture was taken in 1964, 2 years before Clara and I met. How old was she then? 30. 28, I corrected. She was 4 years older than me. Doris turned the photo over and read the inscription aloud. Forgive me. I wonder what she was asking forgiveness for. I've been wondering the same thing, I sighed. And why she would keep this photograph hidden for all these years. And what this key opens, Doris added, picking up the small metal object. It looks very old. Yes, and very unusual. I've never seen a key like this in our house. Doris examined it closely. You know what this reminds me of? A key to an old safe deposit box or a secret lockbox. My grandfather had a desk with a false bottom and a very tricky lock. I pondered the possibility. Could Clara have had something like that? And if so, where would she have kept it? I have to search for it, I said firmly. Something that this key opens. Something that might explain who Robert was and why Clara held onto his photograph. What about Amelia and Marcus? Doris asked. Are you going to confront them? Not yet, I shook my head. First, I need to understand what this all means. And I need to know if they were aware of the hidden compartment. According to Liam, Marcus was very interested in the watch's mechanism. You think they were looking for something specific? Perhaps. But what? And how could they have known about a hidden compartment that even I was unaware of? We debated these questions for a while longer but came to no conclusions. Finally, I decided it was time to go home and begin my search. Be careful, Arthur, Doris warned as she walked me to the door. If Amelia and Marcus are truly after something, they won't be pleased to learn that you've beaten them to it. I nodded, knowing she was right. The situation was growing more complicated and potentially more dangerous by the hour. When I arrived home, the first thing I did was go to the bedroom and hide the watch, the photograph, and the key in a new location, an old jewelry box I kept in the back of the closet. Then, I began a systematic search of the house, starting with Clara's study. The study had remained almost completely untouched since her death. I hadn't been able to bring myself to sort through her belongings, to discard her papers, or to clear the shelves of the books she had loved. Everything was just as it had been when she was alive, the massive oak desk, the leather chair, the bookshelves, the paintings on the walls. I methodically went through every desk drawer, every shelf, every corner of the room, searching for anything that could be opened with that tiny key, but I found nothing. My gaze drifted to the painting hanging above the desk, a seascape Clara had bought on our trip to Italy. I had always assumed there was just a wall behind it. But what if? I lifted the painting off its hook and examined the wall. At first glance, it appeared normal. But as I ran my hand over the surface, I felt a slight irregularity. Looking closer, I noticed a very thin line forming a rectangle, roughly 12 by 16 inches. My heart began to race. I knocked on the wall. The sound in that spot was different, more hollow. There was definitely something there. But how did one open it? I inspected the rectangular outline again and saw a minuscule hole in one corner, a hole that could be a keyhole. With trembling hands, I took out the small key and inserted it into the hole. It fit perfectly. I turned the key, and the section of wall that had seemed solid clicked and moved forward slightly, revealing a small, hidden niche. Inside the niche sat an old leather-bound folder, tied with a ribbon. I carefully lifted it out and placed it on the desk. I untied the ribbon and opened the folder. Inside were documents, old letters, photographs, and some official-looking papers. On top of the stack was an envelope with "To Arthur, if anything happens" written on it in Clara's distinct handwriting. She had left this for me. But why had she hidden it? Why had she never told me about this hiding place, about the key, or about this folder? My hand shook as I opened the envelope and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it and began to read. My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer with you, and it means you have found the key I hid in the watch. I sank into the chair, the world seeming to shift beneath me. Clara had known this day might come. She had prepared for it. She had left me a message from beyond the grave. I continued to read, and with every line, the world I thought I knew began to crumble, only to be rebuilt into something entirely new. There are things I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you. You, and someone else. Now, it is time for you to know the truth. I turned the page, bracing myself to learn the secret Clara had kept for all these years, a secret that began with a photograph of a young man named Robert and a note that simply said, "Forgive me." After returning from Liam's shop, I went upstairs and hid the watch in a new spot, an old showbox on the highest shelf in my wardrobe, placing the envelope with the photograph and key beside it. I needed to process, to organize my thoughts. Down in the kitchen, I put the kettle on. The familiar, mechanical actions were a small comfort, getting a mug, spooning in the tea leaves, adding a touch of sugar. These were rituals I had performed for decades, but my mind was far from domestic concerns. Who was Robert? Why had Clara kept his picture in a secret compartment? And what did the plea for forgiveness mean? Once my tea was made, I returned to the bedroom and took out the envelope again. I laid the photograph on the bed and studied it. A young man with dark hair and intense, serious eyes. There was something about his features that pricked at my memory, but I couldn't grasp what it was. I turned the photo over and read the inscription one more time. Robert, 1964. Forgive me. Clara's handwriting was firm and steady, without a hint of hesitation, yet those simple words were weighted with sorrow. I picked up the small key and examined it. It was tiny, old-fashioned, with an ornate head. What could it possibly open? A lockbox? A safe? A drawer? And then an idea struck me. The writing on the back of the photograph. What if it wasn't just a message? What if it was a clue? I quickly got dressed and went down to Clara's study. The room had been preserved as she left it. I couldn't bring myself to disturb her things, to rearrange her books, or to take down the art from the walls. Everything was as it had been when she was alive. The heavy oak desk, the worn leather armchair, the shelves filled with books, and the paintings. The paintings. I slowly scanned the walls. There were 5 of them. The seascape above her desk from our trip to Italy, an abstract Art Nouveau piece, a gift from a colleague, a Monet reproduction, a photograph of New York City from our honeymoon, and a small portrait of a woman painted by a local artist. My eyes lingered on that last one. The woman in the portrait was elderly, with silver hair and a lined face, but there was something in her features, the set of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, that was familiar. I stepped closer, peering at the painting. Yes, I could see it now. The woman in the portrait could easily be an older version of the young man, Robert, from the photograph. My heart hammered in my chest. I carefully took the painting down from the wall. There was nothing on the back of the frame, just the standard paper backing. I hung the portrait back in its place and continued my inspection. Next was the photograph of New York. As I lifted it, I noticed it felt heavier than a normal picture frame should. Turning it over, I saw that the backing seemed to have been recently replaced. The paper was cleaner and fresher than on the other frames. I carefully peeled it away and looked inside. It was empty. I checked the remaining paintings but found nothing unusual. The last one was the seascape above Clara's desk, her favorite. She often said it reminded her of freedom and the endless horizons ahead. I took the painting down and meticulously examined the frame, the backing, the canvas itself. Nothing. I was about to hang it back up when my eyes caught something on the wall behind it. At first, it just looked like an ordinary wall, painted the same pale beige as the rest of the study. But as I looked closer, I saw a faint, almost invisible line. The line formed a rectangle, roughly 15 by 20 inches. My heart pounded even faster. I ran my fingers along the line and felt a slight ridge. In one corner of the rectangle was a tiny hole, so small it could easily be mistaken for a flaw in the plaster. With trembling hands, I took out the key and held it to the hole. It slid in perfectly, without the slightest bit of resistance. I turned it, and the section of the wall that had seemed solid clicked and shifted forward. A hidden safe. Clara had a safe hidden in the wall of her study, and for nearly 50 years, I had never known. I gently pulled on the protruding panel, and it swung open, revealing a small recess. Inside sat a dark leather folder, tied with a simple ribbon. I lifted it out and carried it to the desk. Sitting in Clara's chair, I slowly untied the ribbon and opened the folder. Inside were several documents, neatly organized in separate envelopes. The first envelope was labeled Will in Clara's firm, confident script. I opened it and pulled out several stapled pages. The first page read, Last Will and Testament of Clara Jane Whitmore. The date was from just 6 months before her death. This was strange. The official will, read by her lawyer after the funeral, was dated 2 years earlier. According to that document, Clara's entire estate was divided between me and our daughter, Amelia, with smaller bequests to a few charities. I started to read. I, Clara Jane Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils and declare this to be my last will and testament. A standard opening. But what followed was radically different from what I had heard in the lawyer's office. My estate shall be distributed as follows. First, to my husband, Arthur James Whitmore, I bequeath our home in Johns Creek with all its contents, all bank accounts registered in my name, and 50% of the shares of Whitmore Analytics. Second, to my son, James Robert Chester, I bequeath 30% of the shares of Whitmore Analytics and the contents of Safety Deposit Box number 112 at the First National Bank of Johns Creek. Third, to my daughter, Amelia Clara Whitmore, I bequeath 20% of the shares of Whitmore Analytics and my collection of watches, with the exception of the Vacheron Constantine pocket watch, which is to remain with my husband, Arthur. I read the paragraph over and over, unable to process the words. A son? Clara had a son. James Robert Chester. And Amelia was to receive only 20% of the company's shares, not the 50% stipulated in the official will. No wonder she and Marcus were so desperate to get their hands on that watch. They must have somehow discovered the existence of this real will and wanted to destroy it. I continued reading. The rest was standard legal language, followed by the signatures of 2 witnesses, Liam Brody and another man whose name I did not recognize. Setting the will aside, I reached for the next envelope. It was addressed simply to Arthur. Inside was a letter, written in Clara's hand. My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer by your side, and you have found the key I hid in the watch. I know I should have told you the truth during my lifetime, but I never found the courage. For that, I ask your forgiveness. The man in the photograph is Robert Chester. We met when I was just starting my career. He was 21, I was 27. It was not love, more of a brief affair that lasted only a few months. When Robert learned I was pregnant, he panicked. His career was just taking off, he wasn't ready for a family. He offered me money for an abortion. I refused and told him I would manage on my own. I left town, and I didn't see him again for over a year. Then, I received a letter containing a picture of a little boy, my son, James. I began sending Robert money anonymously, through a lawyer. He never asked for more, never threatened to reveal the child's existence. He was a strong man, and he raised James by himself. When I met you, Arthur, James was already 2 years old. I fell in love with you instantly and knew I wanted to spend my life with you. But I was terrified that if I told you about James, you would turn away from me. It was an act of cowardice, and I see now that I should have been honest from the start. I continued to support James financially all these years, through a trust managed by my lawyer. Robert died when James was 18, cancer, swift and merciless. I met James a few times after that, in secret, during what I told you were business trips. He has grown into a remarkable man, intelligent, kind, and strong, just like his father. He is married now and has 2 children. My grandchildren, whom I have only seen in photographs. James knows about me, that I am his mother. But he has never demanded recognition or intruded on our life. He understood that I had another family, you and Amelia. The official will, held by my lawyer, was written 2 years ago, when I was still too afraid to reveal the truth. But a few months ago, I drew up a new will, the one you have found. I planned to talk to you, to tell you everything. But my health began to fail, and I kept postponing the difficult conversation. Forgive me, Arthur. Forgive the lies, the secrecy, the years of silence. Please know that I loved you with all my heart, every single day of our life together. In a separate envelope, you will find all of James's information, his address, phone number, and photos. I leave it to you to decide whether to contact him. He knows you exist and will respect whatever choice you make. With eternal love, Clara. I set the letter down, tears streaming down my face. So many years. So many years of secrets. Clara had a son, a grown man with a family of his own. I had a stepson I never knew existed. I picked up the 3rd envelope. Inside were pictures of James at various ages, from a small boy to a grown man. In the most recent photograph, he stood beside a woman and 2 children, a boy of about 10 and a girl around 7. The family resemblance was undeniable. The same dark hair, the same jawline, the same eyes. James was the image of his father, Robert, but I could see Clara's features in his smile, in the way he held his head. The envelope also contained a sheet of paper with an address in Portland, Oregon, and a phone number. James lived on the other side of the country, just a few hours away by plane. I went back to the will and read it again. So many things were clear now. Amelia and Marcus must have learned about James and the real will. Perhaps they had stumbled upon some of Clara's papers after her death. They wanted to destroy the evidence to secure a larger inheritance for Amelia. But how did they know about the key in the watch? Maybe Clara had mentioned it in some document they found. Or perhaps they just guessed that something important would be connected to her most prized possession. I gathered all the documents back into the folder and tied the ribbon. I returned the folder to the safe, closed it, and rehung the painting. I needed time to think before I acted. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, my second of the day, which was highly unusual for me. But today's revelations warranted something stronger than tea. So, Clara had a son from an affair before we met. She had supported him for years and even met him in secret. And she had left him 30% of her company's stock, significantly more than she left Amelia. I couldn't blame Clara for the fact of James's existence, it all happened before our time. But to hide it for 50 years, to lie every day, to pretend she had only one child, one family. And Amelia. Amelia had obviously discovered the truth and decided to conceal it from me to avoid losing part of her inheritance. My own daughter had chosen deceit over family, for money. I remembered the final words of Clara's letter. I leave it to you to decide whether or not to contact him. James was a grown man with his own life. Did he need me, the husband of the mother who never publicly acknowledged him, to suddenly appear? And did I need that? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I could not allow Amelia and Marcus to get away with their deception. Clara's true will had to be honored, regardless of how painful the consequences might be for all of us. Finishing my wine, I decided to call Doris. I needed a friend's counsel before I took another step. Doris, it's Arthur. You are not going to believe what I've discovered. I told her everything: the safe, the real will, James, Clara's letter. Doris listened without a single interruption, only sighing or gasping in shock. What will you do now? She asked when I had finished. I have to contact a lawyer and show him the real will. I think I need to find James. To tell him that I know the truth and that I don't hold any of this against him. And what about Amelia and Marcus? I sighed. That was the most difficult question of all. I don't know. Part of me wants to confront them, to accuse them of theft and deception. But another part of me, another part is just so tired of all of it. The lies, the secrets, the betrayal. Give yourself some time, Doris said gently. You've learned too much in one day. Rest, think, and then decide. She was right. I was emotionally drained. The day's revelations had completely upended my life, everything I thought I knew and believed. Thank you, Doris, I said. I'll call you tomorrow. After we hung up, I went upstairs to my room, took the watch out of its hiding place, and just stared at it for a long time. This watch had guarded Clara's secret for all those years. It was the bridge between the past and the present, between mystery and truth. I opened the back and pressed the small panel as Liam had shown me. The compartment was empty now. I had the photograph and the key, but the watch itself remained precise, dependable, keeping a time that could never be reclaimed. As I fell asleep, I thought of Clara, of James, of Amelia, of a life filled with secrets and things left unsaid, and of the truth, which, as it turned out, was far more complex than I could have ever imagined. I awoke the next morning with a clear mind and a firm resolve. There would be no more secrets, no more evasions, no more manipulation. It was time for action. The first thing I did was call Gordon Prescott, the lawyer who had managed Clara's affairs for the last 20 years. He was surprised to hear from me. We hadn't spoken since he read the official will 3 years ago. Mr. Whitmore, to what do I owe the pleasure? His voice was cautious, as if he sensed something was amiss. Mr. Prescott, I need to see you today. It concerns my wife's will. The will has been executed, Mr. Whitmore. All assets were distributed according to Mrs. Whitmore's final wishes. Not all of them, Mr. Prescott. I have found a second will, dated later than the one you read to us. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I will be in the office until 6, he said finally. You can come by whenever you're ready. I scheduled an appointment for 2 o'clock, then I called Amelia. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice thick with sleep. Dad? Is everything okay? We need to talk, Amelia. I need you and Marcus to come to the house tonight. 7 o'clock. Tonight? But we have plans. Cancel them. My tone was one I rarely used with my daughter, and she must have sensed the gravity of the situation. Okay, Dad. We'll be there. Is something wrong? We'll discuss it tonight, I said, and ended the call. Then I called Doris. I needed her moral support. I'm seeing the lawyer at 2, I told her. And I'm meeting Amelia and Marcus tonight. Are you sure you're ready for all this? I could hear the worry in her voice. I'm more than ready, Doris. The time for lies and manipulation is over. It's time for all of us to face the truth. I hung up the phone and went into Clara's study. I opened the safe and took out the will and the letter. These documents were about to set everything straight. At 2 o'clock, I was sitting in Gordon Prescott's office as he meticulously examined the will I had brought him. This is definitely Mrs. Whitmore's handwriting, he said at last. And the seal is authentic. The witnesses. Liam Brodie, I know him. And the other, Thomas Henderson, is a notary your wife often worked with. So, the will is valid. Legally, yes, it is valid, and it supersedes the previous one. However, its execution will be problematic. Why? The assets have already been distributed according to the first will. Amelia received 50% of the company, not 20, as stated here. And this James Chester, he never made a claim to his inheritance. Because he didn't know about it, I said, handing him Clara's letter. Read this. Prescott read the letter, his eyebrows rising higher with each line. This is unexpected, he murmured. Mrs. Whitmore never mentioned another child. Apparently, it was a secret she kept her entire life. But now the truth is out. I want this will to be honored. Prescott sighed. This will be difficult, Mr. Whitmore. Amelia is likely to contest it. The legal process could take months, if not years. I'm prepared for that, I said firmly. This is not about money, Mr. Prescott. It is about truth, and about respecting my wife's final wishes. He nodded in understanding. Very well. We will need to prepare the necessary filings and contact Mr. Chester. I will handle that myself, I said. I have his contact information. We discussed the next steps, and Prescott promised to have all the required documents ready within a few days. I left his office feeling as though I had finally taken the first step toward restoring justice. That evening, at 7 o'clock sharp, Amelia and Marcus arrived. I met them in the living room, where I had already set out tea and cookies, not because I wanted to treat them, but because some conversations are better had over a cup of tea. Amelia looked anxious, Marcus looked guarded. They sat on the sofa opposite my armchair, and I saw them exchange a nervous glance. "Dad, what's going on?" Amelia asked. "You didn't sound like yourself on the phone." I looked at my daughter, my only child, my own flesh and blood. How had we arrived at this point, where we were practically strangers? "I spoke with Liam Brody yesterday," I began, watching their reactions closely. Marcus paled slightly. Amelia tensed. Yes, her voice was a little too casual. I could see her fingers gripping the arm of the sofa. "He told me you brought him Clara's watch. A Vacheron Constantine. The very same one that went missing from my jewelry case." "What?" Amelia feigned surprise. "What watch?" "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Don't make this any harder than it needs to be, Amelia." I shook my head. "I know you took the watch. I know you tried to sell it. And I know what Liam found inside." Now they both looked truly alarmed. Amelia shot Marcus a panicked look. "Dad, I have no idea what you're implying," Amelia started, but I cut her off. "No more lies." My voice was firm. "I found the safe in your mother's study. And I found the real will." Amelia sat up straight. "What real will?" "Mother's will was read 3 years ago. That was an old will. Clara made a new one 6 months before she passed. And in it, she leaves 30% of her company to her son, James Chester. And you, Amelia, only get 20". A heavy silence filled the room. Amelia and Marcus stared at me, their faces a mask of shock. "That's impossible," Amelia finally whispered. "Mother didn't have another child. It has to be a mistake." "There is no mistake." I pulled a photograph of James with his wife and children from my pocket and slid it across the coffee table. "There he is. Your half-brother, and his family." Amelia picked up the photo with a trembling hand. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his eyes wide. "He looks like Clara," he breathed. Amelia tossed the photograph back on the table. "This doesn't prove anything. It could be anyone. And this so-called new will is probably a fake. It's signed by 2 witnesses and notarized," I said calmly. "Gordon Prescott authenticated it this afternoon." "You went to Prescott?" Amelia jumped to her feet. "Without me? This is my inheritance at stake." "And James's," I reminded her. "Who, unlike you, never demanded a thing from his mother. Because he's not her son." Amelia was nearly shouting now. "This is some kind of scam, and you've fallen for it, Dad." Marcus placed a hand on his wife's arm, trying to calm her. "Arthur," he said in his most reasonable tone. "Let's all just discuss this calmly. This is a very unusual situation, and we need to work through it together." "There is nothing to discuss," I replied coolly. "I have found Clara's real will, and it will be enforced. You knew about it, didn't you? That's why you stole the watch. You were looking for the key to the safe." They exchanged another quick glance, and I knew I had hit the mark. "We didn't steal any watch," Marcus insisted. "And we knew nothing about any safe." "Then where did you get the Vacheron Constantine?" I asked. "The one Liam showed me yesterday." Amelia looked trapped. I found it in Mother's study after she died. It belonged to her, which means legally, it's mine now." "No, Amelia. The will specifically states that the watch was to remain with me. And you knew that, which is why you never mentioned finding it. You stole it from my jewelry case." "I did not steal it," she raised her voice. I simply took what was rightfully mine. Just like the 50% of the company's stock. I shook my head. That isn't rightfully yours, Amelia. That is what you received through fraud. By hiding your mother's true will. She clenched her fists. I didn't hide anything. That will didn't exist until you found it. You're lying, I looked her straight in the eye. You knew about James. You knew about the real will. And you decided to keep it from me so you could get more money. Marcus intervened, sensing things were escalating. Arthur, these are very serious accusations. Do you have any proof that Amelia knew about another will? Your actions are all the proof I need, I replied. You stole the watch, tried to sell it, and showed a very specific interest in its mechanism. Liam told me you offered him extra money for a thorough inspection. You were looking for the key to the safe. Amelia and Marcus looked at each other again, and this time, I saw genuine fear in their eyes. It's all a misunderstanding, Marcus muttered. We just wanted to have the watch appraised. Enough lies. I was weary of the conversation. I have already engaged a lawyer. This will is going to be executed. James will receive his rightful share of the company, just as your mother wanted. I'll fight it in court. Amelia shot back. It's a forgery, and I'll prove it. Do as you wish, I shrugged. But be aware that all the evidence is against you. The watch you tried to sell, the key, the hidden safe, Clara's letter explaining everything. The letter. Marcus leaned forward. What letter? Clara left me a letter in the safe. It explains everything, who James is, why she hid his existence, and why she wrote a new will. Amelia turned even paler. I want to see that letter. The lawyer has it, I lied. In truth, the letter was safely tucked away in my bedroom with my other important papers. Marcus put a hand on his wife's shoulder. Amelia, we need to think. We need to talk to our own lawyer. There's nothing to think about, she snapped, shaking off his hand. This is some kind of conspiracy. This James, whoever he is not getting 1 cent of my mother's inheritance. He is her son, I said calmly. Your brother, whether you like it or not. He is nobody to me. Amelia was practically screaming. And if you take his side against me, Dad, then what? I looked at her, my voice defiant. What will you do, Amelia? Stop your obligatory monthly visits? Cease your holiday phone calls? Or perhaps you'll stop hinting that I should be put in a retirement home. She froze, stunned by my words. I never. Don't lie, I shook my head. I know all about your plans, your suggestions, your desire to sell this house. But you know what? I am going to sell it now. Both Amelia and Marcus were staring at me in utter shock. Sell the house? Marcus blinked. But where will you go? I found a lovely apartment downtown, I said, enjoying their stunned silence. Small, but cozy. No stairs, an elevator, a concierge. Perfect for a single, older gentleman, I smiled. But why? Amelia seemed completely lost. This house, there are so many memories here. Yes, Amelia. And many of them no longer bring me any joy. Especially the memories from the last few years. I looked her directly in the eye. I am tired of the lies, the manipulation, the pretense. It is time for me to start a new chapter. And what will you do? She asked, still unable to believe what was happening. Live, I answered simply. Travel. See the parts of the world I always dreamed of seeing but never had the chance to explore, because of my duties as a husband and a father. With what money? Marcus blurted out, earning a sharp glance from Amelia. With my money, Marcus, I smiled at him. Clara left me more than enough. And half the proceeds from the sale of this house will be mine as well. Half? Amelia frowned. And the other half? It will be divided according to the will, I shrugged. Between you and James. I won't allow it, she exclaimed. This house is part of my inheritance. I grew up here. And you left the first chance you got, I reminded her. And only returned when you needed something. It's not fair. Life isn't fair, Amelia, I sighed. I would have thought you'd learned that by now. Marcus put a placating hand on his wife's shoulder. Amelia, let's think about this rationally. Perhaps there is a way to settle this amicably, without a lawsuit and a scandal. What other way? She looked at him, her eyes blazing. Give half of what is mine to some stranger. Not half, Amelia, I corrected her. According to the will, James receives 30% of the company and the contents of the safety deposit box. You receive 20% of the shares and the watch collection, minus the Vacheron Constantine. It's robbery, she cried. Why should he get more than me? I am her daughter. And he is her son, I replied calmly. The son she never acknowledged. The son she hid from the world. Perhaps this was her way of trying to make amends. Amelia shook her head, unable to accept what she was hearing. This is insane. You cannot possibly think I am going to agree to this. You can agree to it, or you can fight it in court, I shrugged. But know that all the documents are authentic, and I have witnesses who can attest to that. What witnesses? Marcus asked warily. Liam Brody, for one. He was one of the signatories on the will. They looked at each other again, and I knew I had them cornered. We need time, Amelia said finally. We need to think about this. Of course, I nodded. Think all you want. But know that the process is already in motion. The lawyers will be contacting James, and the true will is going to be executed. And you? Amelia looked at me with a flicker of something new, concern, perhaps. Are you going to meet him? I paused. Did I want to meet James? The man who was my wife's son, whose existence I had been oblivious to for 50 years. No, I said at last. I'll let the lawyers handle that. I have no desire to meet him. It's not his fault that Clara lied to both of us, but I am too old for new family dramas. So you're just going to let it happen? Amelia seemed confused. Let him take a piece of our inheritance, and you don't even want to see his face. It's not our inheritance, Amelia. It's Clara's inheritance, and she had every right to dispose of it as she saw fit. I looked at my daughter with a sudden, profound weariness. And yes, I am letting it all go. For far too long, I have lived in the shadow of lies and secrets. It's time for me to move on. We argued for a while longer, but it was clear that Amelia and Marcus were defeated. They knew I had found the real will, and that I had more than enough proof of its legitimacy. Their scheme had failed spectacularly, and now all they could do was try to salvage what was left. When they finally departed, a strange sense of peace washed over me. It felt as though a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Yes, there were challenges ahead, legal proceedings, selling the house, moving, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I called Doris and told her how the meeting had gone. They didn't admit to stealing the watch, she asked. Not in so many words. Marcus claimed Amelia found it in Clara's study. But their reaction when I mentioned the Rail will said it all. They knew. They definitely knew. So, what now? Now, I move forward, I said with conviction. Tomorrow, I'm calling a real estate agent about selling the house. And I'm going to start planning my travels. Where will you go first? I thought for a moment. There were so many places I had dreamed of seeing, so many parts of the world I wanted to experience. Italy, I said finally. Tuscany. Clara and I always planned to spend more time there, but we never got the chance. That sounds wonderful. Doris's voice was genuinely happy for me. You deserve it, Arthur. After everything you've been through. Thank you, Doris, I smiled, though she couldn't see it. For being here for me through all of this. After our call, I went upstairs and retrieved the watch. I opened the back cover and pressed the panel, revealing the empty compartment. The photograph and the key were stored safely elsewhere, but the watch itself remained precise, dependable, keeping a time that could never be taken back. I closed the lid and set the watch on my bedside table. It had been a silent witness to so many years of my life, so many joys and so many sorrows. And now, it would be a witness to my new beginning. The next morning, I woke with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. A new life stretched out before me, one free of lies, manipulation, and toxic relationships. A life where I would make my own decisions, for myself, without trying to please anyone else or live up to their expectations. I knew Amelia would not give up easily. She would likely fight, perhaps even take me to court. But that no longer bothered me. I had the truth on my side, and that was a powerful source of strength. As for James, perhaps one day I would want to meet him, to get to know the man who was Clara's son, to see her reflection in his face. But not yet. For now, I needed time for myself, time to heal old wounds and start a new chapter. I opened the curtains and gazed out at the garden, awash in the morning sunlight. The jasmine bush that Clara had planted for our 20th anniversary was covered in blossoms, like a constellation of white stars against the dark green leaves. I would miss this garden, this house, and the memories they held. But I would not look back. A new day was dawning, with new horizons and new possibilities. And for the first time in a very long time, I was ready to meet them with an open heart.